So today we'll work on a topic which is aggregates, which is similar to cache. So I'll explain you what is aggregates and how does it will differ from cache, and what is the advantage of aggregates. Right. So we all know what is an aggregation. So aggregation is kind of a summary where, I mean, it could be any function. It could be a sum, or it could be average, minimum, or whatever it could be. So there are a lot of aggregate functions. So essentially, aggregation is kind of you are summarizing the data and keeping the data in one place. Right? So I mean, our reports are aggregated. So when I say report, that itself means an aggregation. So suppose say if I have a million records, so I don't really display all the million records and say that I call it as a report, because if I display million records, it's kind of a table. It's not a report, right? So table, you display million records. Now, how can I make sense out of these million records? Nothing. So I simply display and read through the million records. It makes no sense for me. So a report itself means an aggregation. So you kind of know out of million records, you kind of summarize a group by, and you kind of create a simple diagrammatic representation or a simple table representation, but which is an aggregated result, and you make some sense out of that report. So that's what my report itself is. So my report itself is an aggregation, right? So now then what is this aggregates we are calling about, and what is that we are talking about, right? So these are all the performance measures. I mean, even if you look at the cache and aggregates, these are all the measures that we take for the improvement of our performance. Because see, reporting is kind of memory intensive work. So if I run a very big report, it's kind of if the true application that is involved, which is a database where we have the actual data available, and OBIEE, which is an application that is processing the actual data. So your data and your application, right? So both are kind of they are really on toes when it is processing, right? Because if you are processing a million of records, your database has to provide these millions of records to your application. So you are connecting to the database and you're reading from the database. So then there is a lot of resources of the database that you are utilizing, because database has to kind of give the data from the database, right? So there is a process in the database that selects and gives the data back to the application, and the application, when it takes the data and it processes the data. So it's kind of when you run a report, these are the two places, the two applications that uses a lot of resources of these applications to process this data to convert it as a report. Okay. Now, essentially, like if I have to do the same activity again and again, so now it's kind of, there's a lot of load on both the systems as well. Let's suppose as we discussed even in the cache, if I run the same report 100 times in a day, so if it takes each time when it runs, it takes 10 minutes. So if you say the 100 times, how much it will take? So rather than running the report multiple times on the systems, so what we plan is we plan something on aggregates here, where aggregates will improve our performance. Aggregate will improve our performance of the report in a way that you don't really need to go and get all the detailed information again and again, where we can pull the data from the aggregated form and make use of that data, right? So let me give you an example and how exactly it looks like and what is that exactly we are trying to implement here. So assuming that if I have a data say assuming that this is my data available. So this is my, say, data warehouse. Right. This is my data warehouse, where inside my data warehouse I have some data available. Okay, inside my data warehouse I have my data available. So what kind of data that is available in my data warehouse is basically assuming that no, I have some data about say sales. So let's take this table as in sales, where I would like to calculate my sales. Now, so when I have some data available in my data warehouse, obviously, so assuming that I have OBIEE here. So what is that we are going to do? We are going to analyze our OBIEE. We're going to analyze the reports using our OBIEE. So now, obviously, assuming that I have a million records. Okay, when I have a million records available in my data warehouse, so what does my OBIEE will do is my OBIEE will make a query to this database, and from the database it will pull the data and it will give it back to the OBIEE. So now here what we are doing is we are going to create a report. Okay, we are going to create a report based out of this data. Right? Simple. So OBIEE makes a query on the million records, and it pulls the million record and it processes the data. So it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't really display the same million records as it is. Makes no sense, right? What does it do? It will process the data, it will summarize, it will group by or whatever based on your condition that you specify. So it will convert this data as a report format. So when I simply display the data as a report format, I don't display million records, I display say 100 records. When I say 100 records, it's not that out of million records I will show only 100 records and ignore the rest of them. No, it will simply aggregate the data, it will summarize the data, it will convert the data into a summary form, and it will display the data in there. So now, having said that, when I display the data in a summary form, I can look at the information. That's what we call it as a report, right? So the data in a summary form, we call it as a report. Okay, now when I have the report, now the idea here is when I don't have any new data available in the data warehouse. Suppose it could be, suppose I'm talking about a sales. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, sorry. Right, so now when my OBIEE is making a query and pulling the data and displaying the data in aggregated form, so I have 100 records here. So now the idea here is, um, when every time I run the report, so I does the same process, because getting the million records and converting and aggregating and displaying the 100 records. So it's kind of processing a million records is a hell lot of a task on both the sides, right? So if the same report is accessed for 100 times, so how many records you're processing? You're processing about 100 million records. You're processing about 100 million records, which is not a small thing, which on a daily basis. So, but again, I'm fine. I mean, I can process 100 million records. That's good. But again, if I see there is any change in the data, if I see there is any change in the data, that's good. I mean, that's okay. But again, if there is no change in the data, if I am looking at the same report for kind of the entire day, even if I run 100 times, okay, if I don't see any change in the data, then obviously it makes no sense, right? So 100 times you're looking at the same data, but unnecessarily, kind of you're working hard to process it and display the data. So when my data doesn't change in the source, when my data is the same in the source, so essentially I'll be producing the same report. So what my aggregate says is something similar to cache, but again it's in a database form. Okay, so what the aggregate says is whatever the reports, whatever the records, 100 records that you are saying that that you're aggregating and displaying, why don't we save that in a table format? So capturing the aggregated data, so which it's nothing but capturing the report in a form of a table. So what it says is you capture these 100 records. Probably you may be grouping the data by like suppose product category and calendar year and the revenue. So that's your report where you have two dimensions where you are analyzing your data. You're analyzing your fact, right? So fact with respect to two dimensions. One is a calendar year, other is a brand, assuming. So brand, calendar year, and the revenue. That is your reports, which means you are having a report where you are storing your report in a table format. So I can say aggregate table. So what is it we are going to do? We are going to create a table which is called aggregate table. So what is an aggregate table here? My aggregate table is nothing but the result of my query in a summary form. So now what OBIEE suggests is rather than my user asks a query every time all the way going here, so you can rather go here directly. So don't make any unnecessary link to your source. So this is no more the actual way of pulling the data. Right, so OBIEE will directly go to the aggregate table. From the aggregate table, it pulls the data. So which means does it like you create one aggregate table for the entire reporting? No, it's for one single report, which means one single query you create. Suppose say now if I have like 20 reports, which I think like it's a very expensive reports where it's taking a lot of time to process and all. So probably you have to create 20 aggregations. That's something. So aggregations are specific to individual report. Right? It's not like you cannot create one simple aggregation and use the same aggregate table for entire reporting. You cannot. So it's kind of per report basis usually. Okay, so it doesn't mean like for all the kind of records or all the data in the data warehouse we keep on creating aggregate tables inside somewhere and we start using the same aggregate tables. It's not that we do it, but again, yes, the purpose of the aggregate tables is kind of there are certain reports which usually take a lot of time, a lot of processing. Then those records we can create aggregates on the database, so it's much easier for you to process the data, process the same report again and again than doing a process of a million records. Okay, so what is that we are doing here is we are actually letting OBIEE to go to aggregate table. Okay, and pull the data from this aggregate table and display these 100 records every time. So when my user runs, simply I get my 100 records, that's it. So display the same 100 records again and again. Yeah, provided when there is no new data here. So what if there is a new data? Suppose say now, how does my new data get populated here? Suppose say this is my OLTP application. So obviously my OLTP application is always get populated with data on a day-to-day basis, right? So this is my operational system, where inside my operational system I just populate the data. So now in between, what do I have? I have something called ETL. Inside my operation system, I have something called ETL in between. So what does my ETL will do? My ETL will kind of always go to your operational system. From the operational system will pull the data. Then the same will be loaded to your data warehouse on a day-to-day basis, assuming like it's a daily. Daily 12 a.m. So when I get a new data daily 12 a.m. Now say I have 1 million, so at 12 a.m. so my ETL loads the data, so now I have like 2 million. I have 1 million so far, and after the 12 a.m. my ETL has loaded another million, so I have 2 million records. Now does my aggregate still work? No, I mean my OBIEE can still do the reporting on these aggregates because the table is available. But again, if I continue to the same or if I continue to use the same report, what happens? I'm unnecessarily showing the wrong report to my user, because my user is always looking at 100 records which I have here, so which we do not want to do. So what we would like to do is we would like to recreate this aggregate table, regenerate this aggregate table based on this new 2 million records. So for that, it's kind of if I run it again and it doesn't go all the way here and get the data, process and store it again, that we don't want to do, because so we already told like when for this particular report, kind of say could be report brand comma calendar year comma. So in assuming that this is our report, so I already told that for this particular report, I'm not actually going to the original database. I'm actually going to get the data from my aggregate table. So now we already set a path for this, saying don't go to the report, only go to the aggregate table. Don't go to the actual data, go to the aggregate table. So now it is got used to this path, and it will only go here and get the data. So there's two options, like whenever there is a change in the data, then we can let this report go here and get the data and recreate this aggregate table again, and from further onwards it will go to here. So that doesn't happen because it's a complex thing where you need to set that for one time you go here and the rest of the time you go here. It's difficult. So now what we do is we pull this out of this kind of OBIEE GUI part or OBIEE processing part. So what we do is we somehow convert that as a script. So the reporting execution part, right, going and getting here and creating aggregate tables, which we do the first time, right? So that particular first time part we converted as a script. So it's kind of more or less we are running a report, but we are not running a report as is from here. We are running a report as a script. So internally we are running a report as a script. Okay, so for that reason, so what do we need to do is we need to generate a script using the OBIEE. So what is that we do? We have a feature called aggregate persistence wizard. What is this aggregate persistence wizard will tell me. Using the aggregate persistence wizard, I am going to actually define what is my report. So because I want to run the report, right? So that's what we want to do. I want to run the report by going here and getting the data. So that is the intention, right? So if I have to run this report in the background, or if I have to run this report through a script, first of all, I need to define the report, right? Because what is that I have I'm going to run as a script is something that I need to define. So within the aggregate persistence wizard, we are going to define what is our report is. So this is my report, right, where I have a dimension level brand, I have another dimension level calendar year, and this is my fact. So any report is the same thing, right? You have a combination of fact and the dimension. So here within my aggregate persistence wizard, what I need to do is I need to define my report in terms of the fact and dimensions. Now the moment I define this uh, kind of a definition explaining how my report looks like, so now I simply define the um, kind of a script where the same script I'll execute inside my data warehouse, or I execute inside my OBIEE through a background process, through a job, and generate the aggregate table. So here what I'm saying is, once I have my aggregate persistence wizard executed, and once I have my script, so I'll run this script. So I can say this is assuming this is a script. This is a script that I'm generating. But again, how do I run this script? I run this script using a job. So we can create a job, or we can kind of execute in the background, whatever. So I can say we can create a server job. Okay. All right. So now I simply go here. So now, right. So the job will get executed. And what does my script will do? My script will simply go and execute job on the OBIEE in the background. Go and execute the job in the BI server in the background. So when my script get executed in the job on the BI server, now internally my BI server will go and get the data from this table, right? And it will generate the aggregate table. But again, it's not from the official channel, in the sense it's not from the actual GUI process that we are doing, no, but it does from the kind of background. So you can, it looks like, for us it looks like it's going and getting the data from the data warehouse, and it is simply populating or regenerating the aggregate table. But again, say, end of the day, that is done by the OBIEE itself, but again through a command line. So through a command line, we are executing a script through the command line of the OBIEE, where it will simply execute and get the data and repopulate this aggregate table. So essentially, we are not going and clicking on the report as a user and running the report, but again we are running the report as a command line execution, where within the command line execution we are running the script. When we run the script in the command line execution, it means like we are running the report in the command line. When I run the report in the command line, obviously we are going to get the data from here and regenerate this aggregate table with the new data. Now when I have 2 million records, when I run this job, it will go and get the data for the 2 million records and regenerate the report, whatever the report that I'm talking about, and repopulate this aggregate table with the latest report. So it will truncate the existing aggregate table, it will recreate the new aggregates. So that way, if my job runs at, suppose if the new data comes at 12 a.m., so assuming that my job is scheduled at 1 a.m. So at 12 a.m. I have data ready. At 1 a.m. my job executes. 1 a.m. my job will go and get the data from this data warehouse and populate the aggregate table. So from tomorrow after 1 a.m. anytime, I mean even at 12 a.m. you run also, it will give the old data, that's it. But the moment the aggregate table is truncated and loaded with the new data, whenever you access the report, see, it will still continue to go and get the data from the same aggregate table, right? So after 1 a.m. you access the report, it will display the data, which is an aggregation form. Simply get the same 100 records or 120 records, whatever the new number of records that it's created, right? It will go here and get the data and display the data to the user. So anyway, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to improve the performance by generating an aggregate tables in a background job on a daily basis, understanding the data load, so that I don't really need to pull a million records and recreate this aggregatable effort, kind of a, um, I don't really need to kind of get the million records 100 times and load the two systems. So what we are doing is we are doing it once in a day, or not, I mean, it could be two times in a day or three times in a day. It could be anything. It all depends on how often my data is kind of updated in my data warehouse. So obviously, because when my data is updated in the data warehouse, when there is a new data in the data warehouse, there is no point of using the same aggregate table. I have to regenerate this aggregate table. Then only I'll be looking at the updated report. So depending on the data load frequency, we see that we schedule our job, and it will regenerate this aggregate table with the up-to-date data that is available in the data warehouse, and my OBIEE will continue to use the new result and display to my end users. So that's what my aggregate tables are. So aggregate tables are similar to cache. Cache is a kind of ready-made where you don't need to do all these scripts and all these efforts, and you run the report. My kind of server will create the cache, and from the next time onwards, when you run the same report again, instead of going to the database, it will get it from the cache. Same as it is, aggregate tables also does the same thing, but only difference here is we create scripts and all. So again, so in other words, cache is the temporary which is in a file form, and you can manage it, you can delete it. So the enhanced version, the confident version of your caches and aggregates. So when you are sure that there are like 10 reports, 20 reports which you would like to maintain offline data, or you would like to maintain can say aggregated data in aggregated form, then I'll create this aggregate tables. So these are like standard reports which immediate, which you would like to control. So which you would like to control it very well, and then you create this aggregate tables. So it's more or less using the cache, but using in a table form rather than using it in a file form, rather than OBIEE controlling the deletion mechanism or updation mechanism. You have your own job running, which is regenerating this aggregate table. So in other words, cache and aggregates are one and the same, but usually there are certain reports which you think important, and which you think like time taking reports, you actually convert them to aggregate tables to have more control. So then that way your reports are much efficient and much faster. So the main objective or main activity that we do in this aggregate persistence wizard is creating script. So obviously what you see here, so there's two things that we see here. One, we need to create the script. Second thing, we need to create a job and run the script. Simple. We need to create a script and create a job and run the script. So our objective is first create the script. So how do I create the script? There is aggregate persistence wizard inside our OBIEE. So we're using that wizard. You select the options like what report that you really want to create. So based on the options that you select, which is a combination of factor and the dimension, my OBIEE will automatically generate a script, and you have the script ready, and save the script somewhere and execute the script on the BI server through a command line utility. So the command line utility, we have something called an NQCMD. So NQ is like the software name, right? Enquire. So the initial version of OBIEE is called what Enquire. That says Enquire. That is called as, in short, it's NQ. CMD is a command line. So NQCMD is basically command line utility of your BI server, where we'll use we run our script on what, on NQCMD, using the NQCMD command line utility, which is nothing but the kind of a command line client for our BI server. So we can send the request to our BI server from the command line. Okay, so I can say this is a node BC client. Okay, so now let's see how do we use the aggregate persistence wizard, and how do we create the script first of all. So if you understand this process theoretically, that's very important, because um, from the practical perspective we can do it, but again you should be in a position to explain what we have really discussed and what we have really kind of planning to implement. That makes a lot of difference here. So now let me open my repository. Right, so this is my repository. Right here, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to use my aggregate persistence wizard. So I get to go to my tools, and so within the tools I have something called utilities. Inside utilities I have aggregate persistence. Inside that utilities, what do I have? I have my aggregate persistence. So this is the one of the utilities that is available inside the OBIEE. So we call that as an aggregate persistence as I execute. So I can give any name. I can give a name to this aggregate persistence, which I call this as generate kind of any name I can give. That doesn't matter. Okay, AGGR underscore say revenue underscore say 6 a.m. I just give some name. Okay, the name of the file could be anything. Suppose say .txt or .sql. So you give any extension. See that the file will. This is the name of the file, but again you need to save this file somewhere, right? So this is what a location is all about. This is a little weird here, because usually when we are actually talking about creating the script, so we define everything at the end. We kind of give the file names, right? So we open the first of all we open the notepad and we start typing it. Once all our information is given there, and at the end we try to save it and we give a name. But here, like, it's a little different. In the beginning itself you give the name and you give the location, kind of. So it doesn't matter. So instead of doing it at the end after selecting all the options by giving the name and all, so it's asking in the beginning itself. So it's kind of two steps ahead. Nothing. It's a matter of you give it in the beginning or you give it in the end. So we are giving the name itself, saying what is the script that we are actually going to generate, with what name and at what location. So I can give any location. I've given some location in my D drive. That's it. Let's now then I have started choosing my options. So what is my model? So this is my model here. Now again, as I said, the wizard is nothing but choosing a report. So it's kind of you are kind of going through a process of creating a report kind of stuff here. So like when I actually need to create a report, what do? I go to my analytics, and inside my analytics I go to my the dimensions and choose the dimensions I want. At the same time I select my fact, right? So it's kind of selecting a fact and the corresponding dimensions. That's nothing but our report, right? Here when I create an aggregate persistence wizard, the moment I select my model, and what I see is I see revenue. So it displays me the facts that is available. Okay, so I have facts, revenue, and the units. Okay, so now I can choose any one of the fact here. I have my revenue. So out of my model, I have revenue here, where I will be using my revenue as the fact. So my fact is done. So if I want to choose the both, and I can also choose both. It's not that I have to choose only one. So at this point of time, I choose one, which is revenue. So out of my model, which is this particular step is see, select the measure on which you want to aggregate. So you're choosing a measure which is nothing but so look at here, this is nothing but choosing your revenue here out of in this report. So you're choosing this revenue. Now what else you need to choose? You need to choose this your dimensions. So this one dimension, this one dimension, something that provided you have your stuff here. Let's say next. Now you have your dimensions, right? So see, that's the reason you can only use aggregate persistence wizard, or you can generate aggregate persistence wizard provided you have your hierarchies. You have to have your hierarchies, otherwise you cannot really do the aggregate persistence wizard. So if you don't have aggregate persistence wizard, you don't see these logical dimensions. When you don't have a logical dimensions, you cannot choose the levels, right? So the important aspect is to create aggregate persistence wizard, you have to have the hierarchies. It's not like, you create some repository with kind of simple tables, and you create the logical tables, and you try to create the aggregates on that. It doesn't work. So you have to have a complete, set of logical tables in the same time hierarchies defined on my logical tables. We'll also call them as a logical dimension. See, the naming convention is a little different here. So what OBIEE calls as this as OBIEE calls as the logical tables here. These tables it calls as the logical tables, and this calls as the dimensions. Okay. But in other words, we can also call them as these. We call them as the dimensions, and we can call them as the hierarchies. So these are the dimensions. These are the hierarchies on the dimensions. So either ways, like we can call them. But the terminology of the OBIEE is these tables are the logical tables. Okay, and these are the dimensions. So we can also call them as the dimension hierarchies, whatever. So from this here, this is the logical dimension, which it's calling these hierarchies as the logical dimensions. Okay, so now what is that I would like to do? I would like to use a level which is nothing but choose any of the level in my dimension. So my product dimension, which is nothing but my product hierarchy, is having 4 levels. So I can choose any of the level to analyze my fact, which is what? Revenue. And again, on the time dimension, I can choose my calendar year. Right. So I mean, if I want to choose this office hierarchy also, that's fine, because then it is kind of, you're using 3 columns. So brand comma year comma kind of within the office, whatever the hierarchy is, company comma revenue. So either you want to use 2 or 3 is totally depending on your choice. So let's use 2 for now. And use a surrogate key is basically if we want to make it as a kind of a key as a combination of these 2, then I'll select the option. Otherwise, just leave it as it is. As a next. So now I have chosen my fact, and I've chosen my dimensions, which is my brand as well as the calendar year. And so the script is ready, right? So because we have given the file name, we have given the location, and we have given the fact and dimension combination. But again, so as I said, aggregate tables are not logical. Aggregate tables are physical. What does it mean? When you run the script, when you run the aggregate tables, your aggregated information is actually going to get saved as a physical table, right? In a database, this information is going to get saved, the aggregate. So whatever the 100 records that I'm talking about, right? Whatever these 100 records that I'm talking about, these 100 records is actually going to get saved in a physical table here. Okay. So now I need to know where is this physical table actually exist. What is the database location? Because when my wizard will run, essentially when my script get created, so when my script get executed, right? So then obviously the script is responsible for providing an insight to my BI server. Where does this aggregate table should get created? So we need to specify, we need to mention where this aggregate table is to be created, right? So that's the reason where you need to choose my connection to identify the location of the aggregate table. So the location of the aggregate table could be any database. It could be the same data warehouse as well. So within the same data warehouse as well, you can. So that's most of the times in the data warehouse itself, we store the aggregate tables also. So I have my database, which I am choosing here. This is Warsail, and again, I have my BA sample, which is nothing but my schema where I am actually using. So I can choose any one of the connection pool. So I have chosen my database, and this is a schema, this is a connection pool, and the fact table that is going to generate is AG underscore revenue. So if I want to change the name, I can change the name, say 1234, because I would like to keep my aggregate table with a unique name. Because if I'm choosing the different combinations, suppose say I have created one more aggregation saying calendar year, comma, company, from the office hierarchy and say revenue. That is another combination. That's another report. So if I give the same AG underscore revenue for both the aggregates, there is a conflict here because the AG underscore revenue already exists and it's created for a different report, which is brand comma year comma revenue. That's the reason you give some unique name for my aggregate for this particular combination. That makes more sense. Okay. So now this is my database where I'm mentioning where my aggregate tables are available, and by default I need to specify what is the name of the aggregate table name, so especially for the fact. So end of the day, it's like a fact is important here, aggregation is important, and again there will be another two tables created, so one for each dimension. So one table created for the brand, other table is created for the calendar year, and there is a one table created with the numbers, which is my age underscore revenue. Okay, let's say next. So with this combination, and it has created some script. So again, end of the day, this script is not any SQL query where you can simply go and execute. This is a script inside the OBIEE. So this is an OBIEE script kind of, where it's simply, if you look at it here, so this is my table for, this is model, which is nothing but your um, for your revenue at levels, brand level and the year level, using connection pool. This is your connection pool in sample. So in this particular database, you are going to create using this connection pool. Okay, this is your revenue at this particular levels. Okay, I say next, and I say finish. So which means my script is ready. So if I go back to my tables, I think I've created something. Here is a refresh. See, this is my script AGGR underscore revenue underscore 6 am. Right, this is the script which will actually get executed when I use it. So now my script is ready, but again, creating a script is it doesn't do anything. Don't think that we have done something now. No, all we have done is we have simply generated the script. That's it. So the wizard is not actually going to create any aggregates. Wizard is not actually going to generate any aggregates. It simply create a script for you. You have the script ready. That's it. But again, our job is to run this script. Our job is to run the script and generate this aggregate table. So now, before I actually go and create any aggregate tables for you, so I would like to go to my database first. Inside my database, I'll take a look at the aggregate tables. Again, I'll show you how does it really look like, and I do some cleanup on the aggregate tables, then we'll regenerate. Okay. Right, if I go to my base sample, because I've been using base sample to generate this aggregate table somehow. So if you are using different database, then probably you can connect to the different database. Right, if you see here, these are the multiple tables that I have. So aggregate tables are always looks this. So SA underscore is the aggregate table usually. This is for the dimension tables, and the fact tables always starts with AG underscore. So I think I have deleted this AG table sometime before. So that gets rid of these tables. I mean, see, it's a kind of see, there's a unique table name that it will get generated. So you don't really need to worry about it's the same table that get generated for every aggregate. No, so it's kind of it is a unique table that it generates. But just I'm deleting this because I want you to realized that for every combination it's creating a table. So I don't want to confuse which table is our table for this particular scenario, because we don't really need to keep track of those things, because my scenario knows, this particular aggregation knows what table it has to use internally. I'll also show you, like, where do we find inside this, on which table it is using, right? Right, so I got rid of the aggregate tables that is already there, which is for a different scenario, but not necessarily you have to delete them. Obviously, don't delete them in real, because if I'm creating a new aggregates use case for one of the report, if I delete the aggregates of other reports, it makes no sense, right? So, but ideally, you keep them as it is, but every time you create your own scenario, so second aggregate set, third aggregate set, so the table names are unique, which get generated. But again, on the fact table, you're the one who's going to make sure that the table is unique, because if I give the same age underscore revenue for every combination wherever there is a revenue used, my server will get confused, and when you're actually running the aggregate scripts on the server, it will fail, because it already sees aggregate table available, right? So that is something that you need to make sure. So now, what is that I need to do now? I need to actually run this aggregate tables. So let me open the script. I think this is, it's kind of a simple command. So before I execute the command, I would like to tell you, like, what is my NQCMD. As I told you, NQCMD is a command line utility of your BI server. So where does this NQCMD sits? So it's somewhere inside your OBIEE installation location. So say it's in my C drive, and there is an Oracle BI. This is where my installation of OBIEE is there. And I don't exactly remember the location, but again, you can search for it. You can go to the search and say NQCMD, it will display to you. But otherwise, my guess is it's in Oracle BI _1 BI Foundation server bin. So this is the location where it should be there. So BI _1 BI Foundation server bin. I simply search for NQCMD. Yes, I have my NQCMD here. This is my small application, 28 KB. This is my command line utility. So I can go to this location through a command. So I go to here and select command prompt, CD, paste. This is my location. So now here, if I type NQCMD, okay. Now what it is opening? If you see, it's simply running something like an Oracle BI ODBC client. So there's something on Oracle BI ODBC client, which is nothing but my ODBC client, which get executed. Right. So now give data source name is nothing but it's specifying where is my source, where exactly is my source. This is one tricky thing that you need to understand. So see, what is the Oracle BI ODBC client means? Any client means? Any client means basically it's a small utility which knows how to connect to the server, right? So which can connect and execute on the server on behalf of you. That's the client utilities that does. So because say SQL server, SQL developer, whatever the SQL developer that you're using, what is this SQL developer is all about? It is also a client utility where I am connecting to my database from my SQL developer client utility and operating my database. So if I want to execute something on the database, what is that I'm doing here? I'm simply going to my SQL developer, and from my SQL developer, I'm doing this connecting and displaying. Basically, this is a kind of client utility where using this client utility, I'm operating my server. The same way here, even in OBIEE, even when I'm talking about this ODBC client utility, Oracle BI client utility means like it's a client utility which you can run the things on BI server. So which means it's kind of a gateway, or it's kind of a small utility that will let me connect to the server and execute something on the server. So now for that I need to know the server, because my client utility, if I want to execute something on the server, I need to know where is my server available. Right, so the BI server location is very important for me, because I need to know where exactly the server is available. For that, what we do is we have to go to our data sources. So at the installation time, Oracle or OBIEE will create one data source that explains your location of your BI server. So I go to my administrative tools in my control panel, data sources, and in this system DSN, it will create one data source which is for my BA server. So you see, Oracle BA server 10G, BA server 11G. This is my data source. Sometimes I'm not sure. I have installed OBIEE twice. That is the reason it has got created two, but only one of these two works. I think it's the first one. Yeah, this is the one. So I mean, if it opens, then it's the one. If I open the other one, I think it won't even open. It gives an error. Nothing. So this is the one that's corrupted. It's the first one that I use. You're attempting to go modify DSN. That's okay. Okay. This is your the name of your ODBC. So this is the connection detail that you provide. I go back to my command. Here I paste my location of my server that I'm connecting. So what is the username? My username is WebLogic. My password is welcome one. Now I connected to my BA server. So it's in my BA server. Now I can choose multiple options like in table info. I give T. So give the catalog pattern. I can give some name. Suppose whatever the report name that I can give. So it will display. Okay. Whatever the catalog pattern. It's like in the catalog folder name or something. Okay. Give user pattern. So kind of it will keep asking you the questions, and based on your answers that is provided, it will either display the report that is available, or it will either run the report depending on options you choose. Okay, so that's kind of this is a command line utility. So I'm gonna say Control C and I'm gonna stop it. Yes, I want to exit. It's got something. I don't know what it is. It took something. Okay. I mean, yeah. So row count it has got 40. So it's kind of you executed something on the server where it has got the details. Probably depending on the report that you have chosen, it has taken some default option. Per name year, per name half. It's kind of looks like it has taken the calendar year. Okay, per name half is, but basically it has the calendar year table. So I think it's a timetable or something. But anyway, so it's kind of you're executing your thing on a command line utility. So now what is that I would like to do is I would like to use this same technique. Okay, but again I don't really want to come here and manually run the script every time on this here, right? So every execution, right, there is two ways of execution: interactive execution and the command execution. Interactive execution is something that what we have seen. So we run it and it will automatically ask you like a data source name. It will ask you your username, password, and you give your options, and that will display the results. So that is an interactive where somebody has to run it manually. So, but there is another is a command execution. So rather than you entering the data every time, you parameterize and you provide through a parameter or through a command line option, so that it will run the script with all the options kind of pre-built, all the options provided upfront. So something similar to this. If I go to my aggregate commands right here, I'm just going to close this windows and this. Okay, this is my command, where I would like to make use of this command. So I'll replicate it here, and I'll give my new name. So I'm going to put it here. That's my script. Probably I can get rid of some of these because it's. But this is my kind of one of the patterns. So this is the pattern that I have. So I have my NQCMD. This is my command line utility, and -u -u is basically the username, this WebLogic, -p is a password, so whatever the password of the WebLogic, and this is minus d is a connection. So where exactly is connection available? This is my connection. You remember we have provided the connection name in the beginning. Give the data source name. When it asked it, we provided this one. So up to this is like, where we are executing the client with the username, password, and the connection so that it can connect. Then s minus s is where is the script name. What is the script that we have? Where is my script available? It is available input OLTP aggregate scripts. What is our script name? Our script name is different, I believe. Probably I can go back. So D input OLTP aggregate. So what is my script name? AGG R underscore revenue underscore 6 AM. So probably now I can use the same name. I can say rename. So the type is what TXT only. It's not an SQL. So it's a TXT file. So I go here and I'll update my script with my own name. So basically this is the script I want to use because this is the option that I've chosen. So this is my NQCMD with the username, password, and the connection with the script location. I simply take this. Now I go back to my command line utility. So I'm in a bin location where my NQCMD file is available. So I say right click and say paste. So now I'm gonna execute this one. So when I'm executing, say enter. So when I execute, it will automatically connect to my BI server using this connection and the username, password, and it will actually execute the script on the server. So this is the script that is executing. So when the execution completes, it will create my aggregate tables inside the server. It's kind of, I'm running the report. This is exactly running the report. See, statements executed, one query processed. Simple. So my report executed on the database. Now if I go back and if I look at my database tables, because I have run right, so if I look at my tables and if I say refresh, so now it has created one fact table which is AG underscore revenue 1234. The table is created. If you look at here, this is your columns. If I click on the data, see, this is how it has generated an aggregated form of the data. Okay, based on the combination. So this per name is kind of, this is your product name, which is brand, and this is your calendar year name, which year, and this is your revenue. This is a fact table, and if you see, it has also generated two dimension tables. One is my brand table with my brand information. 1, 2, 3 is a key, and this is the value. So, and this is my year information where it's like, it's a key, and this is the different years. And again, if I say is year, then it's a combination of these three. Okay, so I mean, we don't really need to worry about like, how these get created and what exactly. So it's internally, my script will take care, my server will take care of creating these tables. So we don't really need to manage them, because when we schedule the script through some shell scripts and all in your Linux or in Windows, so obviously these will get regenerated, right? So the script will automatically take care of regenerating these tables with new data. And there is one more major difference that happens is on the repository front. So if where is my repository? On the repository level. So it's not that only you create the tables and you don't do anything, because that's not the case here. So I close this repository now because my repository get updated with the aggregate tables. I say open my repository again, welcome one, and my password of the repository is also welcome one. Now when I look at my physical table, now I see that these tables which are created new, so which is AG underscore revenue underscore 1234 and SA underscore brand, these tables are actually imported into your, see, these tables are actually imported into your physical layer that always, says your this key column, and this is your kind of, revenue. Okay, so basically, if you see these three tables, these are the three individual tables. If I say physical diagram selected objects only, okay, they are somehow linked. So my revenue, my year, and my brand, they are the tables which join together, where we can pull the data based on these three tables. Okay, so now again, so adding the tables here makes no kind of no sense, because at the same time we also need to specify at these levels, this will also get added as one of the other source. So which is for, because my revenue is actually going to get from age underscore revenue going forward. Whenever I use my revenue, I'm going to get my uh, age underscore this revenue from this table, then getting it from the actual revenue table. So that's the whole idea. If I double click on this source, if I see the column mapping, for this particular column mapping, where is this data that I'm getting? I'm getting the data from a column, and from which table? Age underscore revenue underscore 1234. So that's what I'm saying. So if I go to my products, if I look at my brand, right, if I see here, my brand is actually mapped back to my SA brand table. And if I look at my time, there's another logical table source added. If my per name here is mapped back to my SA. So that's how my logical tables are actually updated. So my tables are imported, and I did mapping in my logical table sources for this column. So if I choose, or if I create a report with this combination, we always get the data from these aggregate tables rather than getting it from the actual physical tables. So I check in, because I have not done any changes in this process. I have not done any changes here. I'm just actually opening and looking at the data. So this is how my aggregate tables are. So now if I go and create a report, essentially my reports are created on the aggregate tables, and my results are extracted from the aggregate tables, then getting it from the actual physical tables. So that way, my report's performance is improved. The performance of the report is improved. So I don't really need to go all the way and get the data from the sources. I can go from here. Let me check if my user is having my WebLogic is having a security identity. Say online filter, I display all the users, because see, when you want to see more detailed information, your log level has to be at least 3. So what is that I'm trying to see now here is, I want to see when I run the report with this combination, is it actually hitting the cache aggregate table, or it's not, or where exactly it's getting the data from. So that way we can prove that when you're actually using this report, when you're actually running this report with this combination, it is actually pulling it from the aggregate table. So for that, if it has to write those entries to my log files, or if it has to write those entries to my query files, then obviously I have to have a sufficient log level on the user, because WebLogic is the user that I'm actually executing it. So that's the reason I increase the log level of the WebLogic. Whenever I run a report with the user WebLogic, it will start writing more log. Okay. So I'm going to create my new analysis. Say, I don't know if I have everything, if I have this combination or not, because I have talked about two tables, which is my product table and the time table. Yeah, we got it. So product brand is one thing, and the other is calendar year, per name year, which is, and I have my factor revenue. So now this is my report. So I simply click on the results. Now when I run this report, I need to see where exactly it is getting the data from. Okay. Now if I have to identify this one, so obviously I have to either go to my administration from here. Here I can see manage sessions. Now I can see the query. So the last but one is actually the query. I click on the last but one, which executed here. When I see here, I should see somewhere it is going and getting the data from your aggregate tables. Then I see, okay, now where is my data actually getting? Select distinct revenue product brand and per name year from which tables, SA underscore table, AG underscore table, which means my data is actually getting it from the aggregate tables, then actually going to the database and getting the data from the actual database. So this is all it's using, all my aggregate tables. So that way, I can specify when you have aggregate tables available on your uh, query, on your report. So again, see, this aggregate table set that I created is only for this particular report. So you create aggregates per report so that on that particular report, when you want to kind of improve the performance, you define the aggregates and make sure that these are populated on a time-to-time basis based on the data load. Okay, so that's how my aggregate works, and that's how we use the aggregate tables to implement our scenario. Okay, so any questions on this, or anything that you don't understand here? Right, I say you're good.